I'm Ariella Morkwitz, the founding director of SVIVAH. We have wonderful new faces here today, and I am so glad that you found your way here. Please stay till the end to introduce yourself. I would love to meet you, and I promise not to run off. And if you're comfortable, and if it's your first time here with us, give a wave or a note in the chat, and I'm going to ask our friends who have been here before to give you all a warm welcome, because tonight, while this is about a book and a remarkable woman and a tragic loss, it is also deeply about community. And it's why we're here. And it's a big piece of what we try to learn together always, how to be better to each other. So if you want to say hi, if it's your first time with us, we're so glad that you came. And I'm going to just ask everybody who's been here before to welcome everybody in. 30 seconds about SVIVAH. SVIVAH is about putting women at the center, discovering and exploring the unique and beautiful Torah that comes from our lived experience. Our goal is always to learn with and from each other, and to do all of this within a very beautiful community of care. We define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you with us and welcome. We love that we are multi-generational and diverse in our backgrounds and affiliations, and we come together in celebration and support of women, our strengths, our unique perspectives, and our ways of impacting the world. Awesome. Before we dive in, I need to give a real thank you to Jordan Rosensky, our SVIVAH Director of Community. You're going to hear from her in a second, but when it hit the news that this book was coming out, I pre-ordered my copy, and it was mostly a gesture of something that I could do for this family. And it was totally a selfish act. It was some small way that I felt like I could do something about something that was so horrifically painful that we all watched play out in real time. I plan to buy it in support and then stick it on my shelf right next to my still, as of now, yet unread copy of Ellie Sharabi's book, Hostage. It was just like too much for my heart. I couldn't fathom the idea of going back to revisit those painful moments of Hersh's story. I think Jordan and Katie took bets on how long it would take me to start crying. I don't know who won. I can still feel my nails digging into my arm when my sister showed me the first propaganda videos of Hersh alive over Passover 2024. I can feel the paint of the peace mural that Hersh painted under the overpass in Jerusalem when I went and visited Israel. I can hear Rachel's sobs on stage at the Democratic National Convention, and I can feel her voice crack as she shrieked his name into that microphone at the Gaza fence. And I remember locking myself up in my bathroom to weep when we found out that he was gone. And I still ask myself, what is it that evokes so much grief over a stranger? And part of me hoped that some of that answer would be in here. But I really, I didn't want to go through that experience again. The experience of that story once was more than enough, selfishly. But Jordan came to one of our team meetings one day and just said simply, I don't want to read this book alone, but I feel like I need to read it. Can we read it together? And I knew she was exactly right, because we held each other through Hersh and Rachel in real time, so we could read Rachel's telling of her story together too. And I immediately introduced Jordan to my very dear and wonderful friend, Dr. Katie Schenk, someone who has been by my side in real life in moments of my own personal grief, the person who I have and still do text just 3 words in the morning. Did you see? And I know that I am together with someone else who is also grieving or worried or celebrating or mourning, no matter what it is that the news holds that day. And I have each of you to thank, those of you who showed up in that WhatsApp group, also nudging me on and encouraging me to be brave as a reader and read another chapter with all of your own beautiful openness and emotion that you showed up with. So I just want to thank you, because I am so, so glad that this book didn't just stay on my shelf, and instead it looks like this, with a million post-its of lessons and wisdoms and heart pulls. I learned so much from this book, and I know that it will continue to offer more lessons and learnings as it stays with me. There was so much in this book, but one thing that I want to offer as we start, as it's Rachel's grim yet straight reminder that we're all on our way to dying. Death is a universal experience, one that none of us will avoid, and we will all experience death, and we will all experience grief. And I want to just acknowledge before we get started that there are likely some of you in this room who are much more proximate to grief. We even had the honor of having one of Hersh's direct family members in community with us for these last 3+ years. We're all going to show up to this story, this family, this grief and death differently. But what I so love and appreciate about the Torah of this book is that it is truly a textbook for us to learn from together. We will all have something to offer, either through our own personal experiences with loss or being in community and adjacent to others in grief. There are just so many ways in which this book offers us room to see ourselves, to learn about ourselves, and to reflect on how we can show up better for and with each other. Because honestly, as incredible an educator and teacher Rachel Goldberg-Polin is, she says it herself. She is not the only one who knows what it means to lose someone you love. So I want to say again, a giant thank you to Jordan Rosensky, our Director of Community, Dr. Katie Shank, and to our beautiful Rabbinit Dahlia Davis, our Director of Pastoral Education, for your thoughtfulness, your care, and your wisdom in holding this conversation tonight, this tender, tender story of love and loss and life and hope and grief and community. And I am so grateful to be able to be here tonight with all of you, learning with and from each other.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ariella. Before we begin, I want to really acknowledge how hard this can be. Not just how hard it might be to host a book club over WhatsApp or Zoom, which were definitely new challenges for us, but how hard it is to put ourselves back into the trauma that Rachel and her family endured. Ariella's introduction was already turning on my waterworks, and I'm feeling it like a pit in my stomach, and I know I'm not the only one feeling that way. So I'm just so glad that we're doing this together. I know I couldn't have picked up the book if I didn't have a community to support me. Just knowing that the SVIVAH community was there for me made it feel like I wasn't alone in my grief. Some of us here tonight were part of the SVIVAH WhatsApp book club for the month of May, sharing reflections and supporting each other and feelings as we read. But if you weren't with us on WhatsApp, that's okay. You might hear the group reference tonight, but it's not necessary to have been with us there. And we're just so glad that you're here with us now. If it's okay with everyone, I'd like to start with a little discussion about trauma and how we're going to do our best to have a trauma-informed gathering tonight. Conversations about October 7th can bring up a lot of strong emotions and even bodily responses. We know that everyone coming into this conversation is coming in with different responses, and there's no one right way or wrong way to be here tonight. We just want everyone to feel like they're part of the community, and I hope that you feel that way. I really want to encourage you to care for yourself in whatever way you might need. If you need to step away, please do so. You can turn off your camera, you can stretch, you can get some water, take a pause, and then come back when and if you're ready. This conversation is being recorded, so you have permission to miss pieces if you need to. And not that you need my permission, but I want to give you that permission to participate however you need to tonight. Maybe it's just listening. Maybe it's being on camera. Maybe it's being off camera. Maybe it's by using the chat, or maybe it's simply by being here. And that is all valid. So in order to make this space as safe as we can, we will not intentionally be sharing graphic details or imagery. And if I could ask you to do the same, I'd really appreciate it. Please help us care for one another by avoiding graphic descriptions in what you share, particularly any images or descriptions of events that weren't in the book. And one more thing I ask of you, if our conversation brings up feelings that linger afterward, please take care of yourself. Please connect with whatever support feels right for you. A friend, someone in your community, spiritual support, professional support. You can always reach out to one of us here at SVIVAH. You can reach out to me directly, but I do want to remind you that I've only finished one semester of my program in spiritual care and counseling, and I'm nowhere near a chaplain yet. So we're going to get started here with some initial reactions and questions from Katie. But before I hand the mic over to her, I was hoping that we could agree on some special community guidelines for tonight, if that's okay. I want to make this room as safe as we can, remembering that we are all connected to Rachel and her words and Israel and October 7th and grief and trauma and emotions in so many different ways. And Katie and I would love to wrap you in a giant metaphorical hug, but she's very British, so don't actually hug her. But since we can't, we thought these agreements might be a way to keep each other feeling supported and heard. Is that okay? And thank you, Ariella, for sharing these. So I'd like to ask if we could make room for every voice. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear from everybody. So please make room for everyone to share. We'd like our conversations to stay connected to the book. And I know our parallel experiences and our memories will come up. And I want to hear what you're thinking, but to keep us all feeling safe and heard, let's try if we can to keep what we're sharing connected to the book and the discussion. Very importantly, I'd like to remind everyone to please respect what is shared. I know you will. And I also know that emotions are high. So let's remember that we're all coming from different spaces. Please try to use I statements and honor that others might be experiencing things differently. Let's keep politics. Can we keep politics outside of this space? Like Rachel did in her book so brilliantly, let's focus on the story and our emotions, and not enter into the realm of politics. And before I introduce Katie, I just want to lift up our reminder around graphic language one more time. Katie and I will not intentionally share graphic details or imagery, and we ask that you help us care for one another by also avoiding graphic descriptions. Thank you so much. And Ariella, you can stop our screen share. So I am so excited to introduce you to my co-facilitator, my new friend, Katie Schenk, Dr. Katie Schenk. She is a public health doctor, a writer, researcher, and a teacher. Until very recently, she worked from the federal government on the systems that protected communities from infectious diseases. And we're going to have this right here in the chat, so you can read along or read it later as well. Katie is originally from London, and she now lives in Washington, D.C., and she's also lived and worked in Israel. And many of her experiences that have shaped her interest in people, cultures, and global perspectives. And I'm so excited to turn this over to her now. So thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Ariella. It's really such a privilege and such an honor to join you this evening and to welcome everyone, whether or not you've joined us in the WhatsApp group. I thought it might be a fun way to begin to start talking about misperceptions and the things that I said or thought about reading this book that I now find myself questioning now that I've spent several weeks reading it and thinking about it and immersed in the powerful words between the pages. Especially things that I was wrong about. I'm never shy to admit when I was wrong. My children tell me that I'm very often wrong. So I'm here to share all the things that I was wrong about. And as we talk, I'd love for you to share your examples in the chat also, things that you might have misperceived or been mistaken or surprised by, and what assumptions you brought to this book that you may now be challenging. I have to be honest, when Ariella first suggested to me this rather madcap idea of a virtual book club around this very much anticipated and really highly emotionally charged book, even before it had been released, talking about it on WhatsApp, talking about it on Zoom, with discussions in parallel. I don't know about the technologies. Despite everything, my immediate response was blind enthusiasm. Books are my love language. And if someone suggests reading a book together, my answer is usually yes, even before I've had a chance to think about it or finish hearing the questions. So look, I'm the kind of nerd who reads my children's assigned school books for English class so that I can talk about it with them. There was no question we were going to do this together. But then I thought about it, and one of the things I first started thinking about was the impression I had of the author, Rachel Goldberg-Polin herself, as an author, as a mother, as a speaker, as an advocate, and how I came to this book knowing a little something about Rachel herself, or thinking that I did, having seen her interviews, having seen her speeches, having seen her advocacy, and the powerful way in which she carries herself, and carried herself indeed through circumstances that are almost impossible to comprehend. I can't even put words to what she has been through. And I believe my exact words to Ariella was something like, of course, she is our prophet. She is the prophet we do not deserve. And I meant it. At the time, I really meant it. I was reacting to her wisdom, to her compassion, to her ability to keep teaching, even while enduring the worst nightmare of every parent. But as I've come through reading the book and following the extraordinary media coverage that Rachel has led surrounding the book, I found myself wanting to complicate that very, one-dimensional picture that I had built up, and challenge some of the very different descriptions of Rachel that I had read and learned about, the ways in which she was described as a prophet of hope. And others speak about her, putting her on a pedestal as a kind of modern saint. Some people have been evoking the concept of the Lamed Vavniks. This is a concept within Judaism of 36 hidden righteous people who, according to tradition, sustain the world through their goodness. And then there is Rachel's description of herself, when she repeatedly, throughout the pages of the book, she repeatedly insists that she's just a normal person. And she says she calls herself an ordinary, very beige person, as she puts it. And reading about this book, reading about her in this book and reading her words in this book has made me more interested in that tension, that dialectic between the symbol, Rachel the symbol, and Rachel the real person and the human being. What happens when this person becomes a symbol and leads these kinds of conversations? What do we gain? What do we lose? What has she stood for? And how do we continue to honor her extraordinary qualities without flattening her into a kind of one-dimensional being? And I'm really grateful that the book gave me a much more multidimensional view, a perspective no less admirable, if anything more admirable, but also more human, about who Rachel really is. And I'm curious whether others came to this book carrying assumptions about Rachel herself, as a mother, as an author, as any kind of angle on her, and how your assumptions may have shifted and changed, and what you've learned about during reading her book, reading her words. The second way in which I want to put it to you that I was wrong and my assumptions needed to be challenged. The second thing I said, in fact, to Ariella was that, this will be a great book to do in a conversation because there are no spoilers. And I was very confident about this. I was naively confident that there no problem about discussing any aspect of this book in a book group, partly because I've spent many years in a book group where everyone's so worried about revealing spoilers that we never actually get round to discussing the actual book. And I have to confess that drives me slightly crazy. My attitude has always been, if you're coming to the book group, we're going to talk about the book, and that includes the ending. And in this case, I felt especially justified because tragically, we all know the twist in the story, and that the way that Hersh's story tragically, brokenheartedly has ended. But Rachel and John's story goes on. And how can we say no spoilers? I think I was wrong. I was not wrong about the outcome, but I was wrong about what constitutes a surprise. Because there were surprises. There were moments that challenged my assumptions. There were revelations about relationships, about grief, about anger, about advocacy, about marriage, there were passages that I did not see coming. And at one point, I read a review, I can't remember which one it was, but a review that seemed determined to reveal every one of those surprises. And I found myself feeling weirdly resentful about spoilers in a way that, made me realize, oh, wait, so there are not plot spoilers, but there are human spoilers, there are emotional spoilers, there are spiritual spoilers. And these surprises weren't about what happened. They were about how people lived through what happened. Because after all, this isn't a story. This was real life. This was a real story. This is a real. I'm sorry, I'm distracted because my doorbell is ringing. And who the hell is at my door? I'm curious whether others have had that experience too. If there were surprises in the context of what were there spoilers. And then finally, the thing I'll conclude by saying is I found myself thinking a lot about what's contained by the title of Rachel's book. She calls When We See You Again. And again, this is about misperceptions. I remember reading a review. I think it was in the New York Times, can't remember. It was an optimistic, it really emphasized the hopeful and almost mystical qualities of the title, When We See You Again. And certainly there is hope there. Remember, Rachel has told us hope is mandatory. There must be hope. But after engaging in conversations with a friend who is a bereaved parent, I found myself wondering about that title and wondering whether that interpretation has missed something much darker. Because when we see you again, that's not simply a comforting future possibility expressing joy and optimism. It's an expression of longing. It's an expression of absence. It's a recognition of a life that has been forever split into the before and the after. And perhaps even at times it's an expression of looking towards one's own death as simply the only way that the separation can end. And that strikes me as in a very different emotional register than optimism. So I wonder, do you have any reflections upon what the meaning of the title represents to you? Is it hope? Is it a prayer even? Is it longing? Is it grief? Deep, deep grief? Is it all of these things at once? As I conclude, I just want to say thank you to this group itself. We are sitting here tonight after several weeks of conversation on WhatsApp, led so ably by Ariella. Thank you for the opportunity, and Jordan with such sensitivity. I've learned so much from our conversation, as all of you have brought different perspectives and backgrounds and experiences and questions. But the most thing that has emerged, as both Ariella and Jordan have pointed to in this conversation, it's not an intellectual learning, it's a community spirit. It's the guiding principle of, it's not about let's become experts in a topic, but it's let's hold each other's hand and keep each other company as we read this book. Let's build community together. This has not been an easy read by any stretch of the imagination, and none of us, I'm sure, approached it thinking it was going to be. It may have felt intimidating or overwhelming. It may have, as has been alluded to, may have touched upon personal experiences of trauma and grief. And so one of the things we tried to do was simply to accompany one another and to bear witness together and to read together and to sit together as we read difficult things. So I hope that spirit carries into our conversation tonight, whether or not you've read the book, whether or not you're offering, a rehearsed interpretation, or you have the smartest comment in the room. You have every right to be here, and please, exactly as you are, share your impressions. And I really look forward to hearing from all of you about what this book has left you with. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jordan.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to turn it right over to our own Rabbinite Dahlia Davis, who is going to offer us a little bit of Torah teaching. So thank you so much, Dahlia.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you, Katie, for opening so beautifully, and Ariella, of course. I wanted to start off with some Torah because I felt like when I was reading Rachel's book, it felt like there was so much Torah that she was teaching us, and there were so many things that she said that led me back to other sources that I've seen, but it totally changed the way that I was looking at those sources. But I want to start with a memory, sort of similar to Ariella. I actually remember when I found out that Hersh had been murdered. It was a Saturday night, and on Shabbat, I have a practice not to look at my phone. And it was those weeks where like the second Shabbat would be over, we'd make Havdalah, and I would run to my phone and open it with this like surge of hope that there would be good news waiting and that the hostages would have come home. And that Saturday night, I saw a message, not from really a reliable source, from some WhatsApp group, something that said that there was a possibility that he had been killed. And I remember the first thing I thought was, no, that's impossible. This is definitely fake news, because somebody whose parents are fighting for them in this way, this just can't be the end of the story. That was my first thought. And then as the day or so passed, I can't even remember how long it took until I found out that that was actually what happened. My next initial thought was, okay, I really want to get on an airplane and go and be there for the funeral and be there for the Shiva. And I was sad that I wasn't there in person, because I felt so drawn to their family. Like Ariella was saying, it felt so close to somebody that I'd never met and to a family that I'd never met. And then I read Rachel's book, particularly the chapter about Shiva, and it completely changed the way that I had thought about that moment and what would have been best for Rachel and what is my role, if anything, in being there for her and for her family. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I want to start by looking together at a quote from Rachel's book. So let me just share my screen with you. I'm going to start with a quote from the chapter that Rachel shares on page 90. That is from her Shiva chapter. And she writes, "And on day 3 or 4, the coin dropped. And finally, John and I realized the game. Shiva is not for us. It's for them. And the performance began all over. Action." And when I read this, I had such a strong reaction. And if you had a reaction when you read this, or if you're hearing this for the first time, this description of Rachel's experience during Shiva, please feel free to contribute in the chat and let me know what you're thinking and how you reacted to this. And I'll tell you, for me, it immediately evoked a text that I'd seen in the past that described a particular dynamic of how one can be and how one can enter into a Shiva home when visiting people that are mourning. And just to kind of give a little bit of background, often it's traditionally the people who are the like direct family members that after a funeral will sit Shiva, will spend a certain amount of time in a place. Often it's their home, but absolutely not always. And people will come and try to offer them comfort. And there are many texts that talk about this as an incredible mitzvah, as an incredible act of kindness to perform for somebody, to try to be there with them in their moment of incredible grief and loss. And so I want to share this one particular idea with you. And it comes from the Shulchan Aruch, which is a code of law. But in this moment, this to me doesn't feel so much like law as it does some type of deep psychology. And so the text reads, "Em nachamim sha'im liftoach ad sheyiftoach ha'avel techila." The mourners are not permitted to open the conversation until the mourner opens first. And so we don't need to look at this necessarily as a law, but just think about, what is the suggestion that the Shulchan Aruch, that this piece of Jewish literature is telling us about how to interact with somebody who is sitting Shiva, who's in mourning, and telling us that as the people offering comfort, we should wait and not speak until the person who is mourning begins the conversation. And I'm not sure why, but for some reason I can't see the chat while I'm sharing on the particular device that I'm on. So if another SVIVAH person can read off if there's some good questions from this chat, or I'll read them after I finish sharing. But I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts about how this strikes you. Like, how do you think this impacts the mourner? What is it like for the mourner to have people come and be near them and not initiate the conversation? And if you have any responses, please put them in the chat. And like I said, if anyone who's in SVIVAH wants to read some, you're welcome to do that. You can jump in. But in the meantime, I'll tell you from my perspective, sometimes it's complicated to come in and to sit with someone in silence. It's often something that's very different than the way that we go about our usual interactions. And it can feel like there's this just heavy, heavy silence. And it's almost sometimes can feel like perhaps the person bringing comfort is putting pressure on the mourner to speak by sitting there and waiting. But then when I was reading Rachel's book, it felt like she kind of wanted the opposite. It's almost like she wanted the silence, and she felt like she had to perform by listening to the mourner speak over and over. And it was something so different to think about in that way. And I want to share with you another piece of text a little bit later in this section, because the Shulchan Aruch continues and says that as soon as the mourner nods his or her head in a manner from which it is indicative that he or she dismisses the comforters, right? So the mourner does this movement with their head, and that's the sign that it's time to leave. The comforters are not permitted to remain seated by him or her. And this also, I think, is created as a way to kind of protect the mourner from being over visited and giving them the agency to say, actually, right now, I want to be alone. And I love that it's not a verbal cue, that it might be so hard for the mourner to say to somebody who has come and wants to be there for them, actually, I need you to leave. Please stop talking. That's such a hard thing to ask them to do. And so there's this like body movement that's there, that's simple. And I guess at this time it was clear. I don't know nowadays how many people would be aware that that's what that indicated. But it was this little sign of, I need to be alone. And then the text is so strong. It says, you can't even stay. That's it. If this happens, you have to respect the space of the mourner and have to go. And this took me right back to the moment in the book where Rachel asked her family members if they could leave early. And that's what she needed. And she was able to express that. And they honored her wishes in a beautiful way. And one more piece that also struck me after reading her book is, this is from another law, a Jewish law sefer, the Aruch HaShulchan, another writer. How much more so, this is coming from a longer discussion about how to care for mourners, it's not fitting for others to ask how they are, meaning the mourners, or make small talk, since the mourner is not in a state of mind in which they feel peace. And I found this to be so insightful because it's so natural, I think, to try to make small talk with people, to remove the silence, to not sit with it, and to ask somebody. The first question I always find myself asking people in general is, oh, how are you? It's such a natural thing to do. It's such a piece of our society and how we interact with one another. And I think it's so insightful here how the Aruch HaShulchan is saying the Hebrew word, shaharei eno sharoi b'shalom. Somebody who is mourning is not in a state in which they feel peace. So don't ask them how they are. Don't confront them in that way. Don't put them in that position where they have to come up with an answer. It's too much. It's too hard. And it is really kind of not meeting them where they are, not understanding where they are. And I love that in the book, Rachel takes us so viscerally and so deeply into the place of what is it like for her and what was her pain like, so that we can really see this exact phrase play out. She was not in a state of peace. That was completely a world in which she did not reside, and asking her how she was such a difficult thing for her. But with all of that, there's still a piece that I was left longing. I still wanted to find a way. How could I be there for her? And I know that there are so many people, all the people that went to SVIVAH, all the people that have sent her messages, and that we've done this for other people as well. There's not just the direct family members that are in mourning. There's other people, secondarily friends, other loved ones who are in mourning too. And there's the people like who maybe have never met the people that have passed away, but have created this emotional connection and want to do something. and want to send some message. And that, therefore, when one leaves a Shiva home, some people recite this phrase, Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch sha'arav leitzion v'Yerushalayim. May the Omnipresent comfort you among the rest of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And this acknowledges that it's not just the person who's directly related to the person who passed away that's in mourning, but it's many, many other people within the community who also feel connected to their loved one, who also feel connected to the story and to the family and to what they represent. And they also feel this. And when I think about this phrase right now, I think about all of us on this call and how we are sitting with this book, whether you've read the whole thing or you just started or you haven't started yet, or you're not sure even if you're going to start. But you're all here, and we're all here together because we feel some connection to Rachel and her family and to Hersh, Zichrono Livracha. And I wanted to make a space for us now because I feel like if we have to hold on to all the things that we want to say and we don't get an opportunity to say them, then that's a lot for us to carry. And at the same time, Rachel was very clear about things that were and were not helpful for her. And so what do we do with that tension between the things that I want to say so many things to Rachel, but it might not be best for her for me to do that. So right now we're going to together create a little space for us to write in the chat. If you have a pen and paper nearby and you want to write, you can do that. If you want to just do it in your mind, that's also totally something you can do. You're all on mute. If you want to talk, you can talk. That's fine too. And we're going to send messages to Rachel that we're never actually going to send to Rachel. So it's an opportunity for you to say what you like to her as if she was here, but we're not going to send them to her because we want to do what's best for her and also give ourselves space to express our feelings at the same time. So we're going to do this in the following way. I'm going to put on a little bit of music for like just 2 minutes. It won't be long. And then there'll be a couple prompts that you'll see on the screen. And while that's happening, you're welcome to, like I said, to write or to speak out loud or think it in your mind. And you can share anything you'd like in the chat, and you can keep anything to yourself that you'd like. Okay, so I'm going to share my sound so that you can both hear the music and so that you can see the And then I encourage you, if this felt helpful to you and you'd like to keep doing this, we can send you the questions. You can come up with other questions and allow yourself the space to write the pieces that are coming from your heart and that you'd like to say, even if you never send it. I want to close my piece with one thing that when I was thinking of what would I want to offer Rachel, the words on page 125 that actually were Hersh's words that he wrote and that she quoted in the book, I think those might be part of the words that I would want to say to Rachel. So I'll read them to you. To every person, there is a tunnel that belongs to them. But whatever comes my way, it won't stop me. It will only slow me down, but I'm not afraid to slow down or even make a U-turn. What is sure is that I am walking to the end of the tunnel.
Thank you so much, Dahlia. That was really, really powerful and such an amazing way to learn and think about Shiva. One thing that I wanted to share with everyone, while Katie and I were preparing for tonight, we came up with so many questions for discussion, and I'm loving seeing all of the things, the pieces that you're sharing in the chat. And I also definitely want to share that we're not going to get to even a quarter of all the questions that we were hoping and the things that we were wanting to discuss tonight, which is great. It means we have more to discuss in the future. So we're gonna get into smaller group discussions so that we can all hear each other in a little bit. But before we do, I just want to open up the space in the chat for your takeaways. What have you been waiting to share? Is there something that you are hoping to discuss tonight, or a scene, or a memory, or a lesson that you would like to share in the chat and give us a chance to reflect on? I'd really love to hear from you about that. I can share myself that I didn't find SVIVAH until after Hersh's death, and I felt very isolated from a Jewish community when I was sort of in the beginning of post-October 7th. And I found a good way for myself to kind of deal with it was not to deal with it. And hearing about Hersh's death and the conditions, it really sort of snapped me out of that feeling like I could just ignore what was going on. And I was so grateful to have found SVIVAH later and feel like I had a community. And that was something that when I, sort of returned to some of those scenes in reading the book, I really sort of felt that. Is there any new information that you learned or you felt surprised about as you read that you would like to share in the chat? Just give folks a minute or two or a minute to share if there's anything that you felt that you learned or you felt surprised about. And while you're thinking about those, I'm going to hand it over to Katie to ask just a couple of questions about how you might sort of describe this book.
Thanks, Jordan. One of the other questions that Jordan and I were talking about was all the different ways in which to explain what we were reading to our friends. And I thought about it in a number of different ways. How would I describe this book to a friend who hadn't been following the story of the Goldberg-Polin family in all the ways that I had, who didn't feel so emotionally invested in hanging on Rachel's every word? What would I say to them? There was another commentary I saw about Rachel's book that noted how she didn't have any blurbs from highfalutin names all over the back of her book or on the cover, that her name and her story was supposed to speak for herself. And in doing so, it didn't mention the words Israel or Jewish, or for that matter, Hamas. It didn't have those keywords in there. This was presented as a universal story of a mother grieving for her son. What I'm just wondering, the question in my mind is, how would you describe this book? Is it a universal story? Is it tied into its circumstances? And the other question that I'm wondering about here, and perhaps we can touch upon this when we go into smaller groups, is, if you were giving this book as a gift, as I have now done a couple of times, what would you write on the gift tag? Or, if you've got a limited number of characters in the slot that the bookseller allows you to write, what's the message that you share to accompany this book? Is that back to you, Jordan?
We never have enough time. I just remind yourself, if you took yourself off mute when you were in your session, if you can just go ahead and put yourself on mute right now, just so we don't pick up any of your background noises as well. So Rachel sort of shared in her book numerous times, and Katie referenced it as well in her introduction, that she thought of herself as really a normal person. She says, you know, her family is comprised of normal people to whom an abnormal, quite rare brand of torture happened. And whether or not we agree that she's normal, I think we can all agree that we see ourselves in parts of Rachel and her family. And some of us in this, you know, this Zoom and in our WhatsApp group are connected to the family, sometimes by only a few degrees of separation, and some by shared experiences or backgrounds. So I wanted to just take a second, you know, SVIVAH is a group of Jewish women. And I'm curious, especially as a group of Jewish women, how you felt connected to Rachel and her story, or what ways that you might have seen yourself in her story. And she spoke, you know, so much about motherhood, and I'm sure many can speak to how that experience of reading a mother share her grief was, you know, so difficult or so familiar. I know she also wrote about how being a Hersh made her want to be a better daughter as well to her parents. So I'm curious if there's anything that people would like to share in the chat quickly, of ways that you might have seen yourself in her story. Or Ariella or Dahlia or Katie, if you'd like to share any reflection that you might have in that topic as well. And yeah, it's like Katie shared in the chat that Hersh's bar mitzvah parsha was Noach, and how familiar that felt, knowing that it was her son's same parsha. It's just a moment so that could connect us so much.
Text, but I was thinking that I really felt connected to Rachel in so many ways as a mother. And I think so many of the comments that we've heard in the discussion and the breakout rooms show that we all appreciate the closeness that we feel with her in some way. And we've each found different ways to connect with her. So when I learned that Hersh's bar mitzvah parsha was the same one that I could hear my son practicing as I was reading her book, it just moved me so much. As another Jewish mother in the same position as Rachel, who also heard her son practicing the same parsha. I'm wondering about, you know, there are so many different angles on this book that we could continue talking about. Rachel talks about how Hersh quoted, "He who has a why can bear anyhow," which these were the words that Hersh shared in the tunnels with his fellow prisoners or hostages. And I'm wondering when Rachel says she is the why for Hersh, and Hersh is the why for her, she's now going to carry his why around the world, she says. And I'm wondering, when you hear these words, what does it mean to inherit the why, to take on somebody else's why? Is it even sustainable? How can you continue to carry the purpose and the why for somebody else? And how on earth is she going to do that? But what does it mean to carry the why for somebody else? Oh, thank you, Ariella, to make somebody else's memory a blessing, to keep them here. I think of this all the time. If I'm speaking with a friend who's had a loss, they want me to mention their loved one's name. Then it's not like they're worried. I mean, they're not going to forget them. They want them to be in conversation, and they want them to be part of the tone of the room and the conversation and the discussion. Samara says, "I'm so glad that Rachel never said she shouldn't have let Hersh travel." And I thought that's a really good point. There was so much in there that she didn't say, that she could have said. And that was one regret she did not have, that she was proud of him. It was, you know, she acknowledged that Hersh was making different choices than she and John, and, you know, some of the angles of their lifestyle. But she was very much supportive of the ways in which he was forging his own path. Let's see.
I think also, you know, Rachel is been so amazing of speaking in so many places about the book and, speaking in places in the press. But I noticed someone mentioned that they were going to be seeing her when she comes to Washington, D.C., I think in just a few days. And I wonder how she's able to share so much of herself, and that sort of idea that now her why has become, or her how has been carrying Hersh's why around the world. And what better inspiration is there to keep you going than sharing his story? I think that's really powerful. Leslie, I love this, related to their last Shabbat together with their children, all together, not knowing what would come next. She noticed that those were her favorite moments that filled her soul. How special is that they were able to have that last Shabbat all together and really be able to look back on that? It's pretty amazing. Deborah's seeing her and John in Boston on Sunday. I'm sure that'll be really great. Yeah.
I think about that when I see them doing this really energetic book tour, and I really admire their strength, and I wonder, I admire how they keep on going, because it has been so intense, the activities and the publicity that they have been engaging in and all the media.
Yeah. Ruth sharing in the chat about her sister and Rachel being in the same USY year course, and couldn't help but imagine that this story could have been my sister's story. I think so many of us probably felt that way. I know that there were so many times that I felt myself in Rachel's shoes of how would I have survived if this was my story? What would that feel like? It is such a, like she says, an abnormal brand of torture that happened to normal people. I think we all could imagine that with our connections to Israel, or what that might feel like.
This being, the Jewish geography, we're all, only a few degrees of separation away from Rachel, and it feels like we're all so connected. I have so much admiration and respect for everything that she has already achieved, and yet she questions the ways in which she's done that. It's what she and John have taken on is a superhuman and amazing task, and yet she questions it throughout the book. And she's so relieved when she finds out that Hersh knew about it, and Hersh heard her on the radio, the TV. He knew what she and John were doing, and there's such beauty in those words and those acceptances.
Katzman, page 102. If we always treat the person next to us as if they are the Messiah disguised as a regular person, we'll be careful with how we speak and what we will do in their presence. Yeah, that will also stick with me for a long time, for sure. The quotes that we had pulled out too is Rachel's idea that hope is mandatory. And I thought, as we kind of close out the session, I'm wondering what it means for hope to be mandatory rather than optional. And I'm wondering if anyone is feeling hopeful right now, if anyone is feeling what they learned from Rachel's story and how the book changed us in the way we see this world. Is anyone holding on to hope? And if you haven't read the book or haven't finished the book yet, I'm curious how you're thinking about hope as well. Seen in the chat too that hope and seeking joy are mandatory, and I definitely agree with you. Hope is hard right now. I have to say I do not. Hope is hard. Hope is hard when we hear this. Ariella shared as well, hope was a hard word for me to connect to this book. I think maybe it was a little naive of me to think we could end on a thought of hope, but I see hope in our community. I see hope in us coming together and being able to have these conversations as well. So I hope that you can feel a little bit of that just in our gathering tonight, and the support that we've been able to offer each other as we move through Rachel and Hersh's story.
And yet when we think about Rachel's words in the book, when she talks about her beliefs and her faith and her religious practice, it's not about some kind of intangible hope. It is actually, she talks about it as in terms of knowledge. She's not questioning. She absolutely knows she will be reunited with Hersh. She absolutely knows. She has absolute and utter belief in these things. It's not about belief. It's knowledge she talks about, and she's not questioning it for a minute. And I'm wondering what lesson to take away from that. Whether I should not be hoping for better times, but I should be quietly confident that better times will come, or that there will be that we'll move from this place into a better place. It's hard to get there, but I can only hope, as that word again, hope to have Rachel's knowledge.
Well, I'm gonna ask Ariella to close us out, and I thank everyone for coming tonight, to being part of this conversation. And for those of you who have been part of the WhatsApp group, thank you for the past month of holding my hand and being there with Katie and myself. And thank you so much.
I feel like I was hoping for tonight to be some kind of like a synopsis, a closure, whatever, like a please help me make sense out of my ridiculous number of post-its. But instead I feel like I'm left with more ponderings and more pages that I want to return to. And I guess that's a sign of a very good book. And I think that's a little bit a way that we look at, so certainly the way that we look at our Torah texts, and definitely any good learning text is one that you revisit and that causes you to stop and rethink and revisit and come back. And I'm grateful to everybody who shared so much in the chat. And I feel like it was a little bit of a tease, like there's so much wisdom in the room, lived experience in the room, and just our own reactions. I think all of us came to this story and experienced it differently, the book differently, and even the reasons why we may not have been able to open it. And I want to know all of those. I'm gonna stick the link to the WhatsApp if you're not in there already. And I'm just gonna, Jordan and Katie, with your permission, can we leave it open for a little while and maybe
Of
share
course.
some of the prompts that we had here tonight to give us a little bit more room to think? I know that like I want to kind of digest, and I certainly want to hear what people have to say and how you're responding to all of this and the questions that may have come up for you that we didn't get to ask. I know Katie and Jordan left dozens on the cutting room floor for tonight, and there are so many, and I think we should continue to learn from this. And I really appreciate having that space together. So please go head on over there if you haven't already. And I just want to give a giant shout out to Jordan and Katie and Dahlia for the intense level of thoughtfulness that you put into holding us tonight. This was, just like the book was not easy, holding all of us through something that is so raw and tender for all of us. Thank you for being so thoughtful and kind and gentle with all of us tonight. I'm very, very grateful.